I'm very glad to be in conversation in this fireside chat with Sunil Gopinath, who's currently Senior Vice President of Products and CEO of Rakuten India. Sunil is currently responsible for scaling out the product and technology footprint for Rakuten across a wide range of Rakuten's global businesses and technology initiatives. Nice to have you, Sunil.
Thank you, Ujwal. Great to be here.
Hey, so Sunil, first of all, as someone who's worked fairly long in engineering and product, it would be great, Sunil, to hear out from you your experience of pivoting from engineering and product leadership roles into a CXO CEO role, which is very, very timely in India, as there is a growing demand for product managers across startups and large companies. And we also want to understand at a senior level how product management careers evolve into CXO roles. So over to you, Sunil.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ujwal. If I sort of look back at my own career progression, like you mentioned, I started off in engineering, then transitioned to product, and product marketing, and then sort of general manager, managing a whole bunch of these functional roles, and eventually leading to this role. One of the things that if I can pick from all of those learnings is working on roles that are the boundaries of your adjacent role, right, has helped me a lot. What I mean by that is, when I was working in engineering and I was doing R&D, software architecture, and so on for almost a decade, right? Towards the end, I started taking on more customer engineering roles. For example, when I was at Qualcomm, one of my major customers were Samsung and LG. So I would visit them very, very frequently in Korea. So understanding, how do they see wireless and, data and all of these things evolving? What are their specific use cases, pain points? Eventually, you start seeing the problem statement from your customer's viewpoint, right? Their systems, their environment, their use cases, and that almost becomes an additional muscle in your brain. So, for me, that was a transition from thinking about the problem in isolation, or working on the problem because you love the technology challenge, to how does this actually solve the customer's problems, or are there other things about their environment that I don't yet realize from this side of the world, right? So that helped sort of build that additional muscle of being the customer, the voice of the customer in the room. Then from there, I took on a product management role, which was another adjacency, right, to customer engineering, where you're sort of like, okay, now that I've built the product, how do I go about defining the product? How do I, how do you know what are the right requirements? And now that you have that sort of customer empathy and voice of the customer sort of built into your system, it's a lot more easier to be a product manager. Over time, I pushed that boundary as well, right? With product management was still sort of, yeah, you do spend time with customers, but it's still sort of inbound product management, as in you're defining the product. You're still working with your technology teams. So it's kind of 50-50, right? Between customer side and, within the company. So then I took on product marketing role, which was a lot more sort of, outbound, right? I'm spending 70% of the time visiting customers, being out in the field, presentations, getting them excited about our vision, and also partnering with sales, pre-sales. So the thing that helped me a lot is sort of taking on these adjacencies and pushing the boundaries of my current role, which would organically put me into the next role, which is right next to mine. And then I also did a small stint in sales. And then I came back and, interestingly, there was a GM opportunity that, came up, where I had to run the entire business line, right? The business, product, technology, analytics, sciences, and so on, which gave me the confidence that, that I can lead this multifunctional organization. I mean, I would say that's probably the one key learning is get to boundary roles within the contours of your current role.
Oh, thank you. I think, Sunil, that's very helpful. And I'm sure lots of great product managers in India will pick that insight from you. And, now as the CEO of Rakuten India, when you interact with your product managers, there is this very common statement that is made that the product manager is the CEO of the product, right? It's a well-known term. and I hear that from a lot of folks I mentor. What do you think about that statement? Do you see it from the vantage point that you have right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I do see. I see the end of the day, you need somebody who is responsible for womb to tomb. I guess there is no tomb in certain cases, but you get the drift, right? It's their baby, right? From have I defined the right product to have I built it right to, is there a good product market fit? Do I have the right sales strategy, right? And am I taking feedback from customers constantly? Am I incorporating it within my product and how successful it? And also a KPI driven approach, right? Very, very metrics and impact focused culture. So all these things tie in with one person, and that is the product manager. Now, there are two differences between sort of when I was a product manager and when I am now, based on the vantage point. And that is when you're a product person, your ability to, you're influencing without authority quite a bit, right? You're influencing sales, you're influencing in technologists, you're influencing your scientists, you're influencing marketing folks, you're influencing your executive leadership. And there are some times where you're going to have differing points of view from your stakeholders coming in, right? Or rather, most of the time. So there is a subtle way in which you have to influence all of that to get it together. In my role, again, that just gets multiplied by 10x, right? Because your engineering leadership, product leadership, sales leadership are all coming in with points of views that are all very legitimate based on data, but they're all differing opposing forces. So how do you now resolve that when it's multiplied by a factor of 10, right? And you're talking, millions of dollars of impact, so it's just that the level of that decision making gets multiplied, amplified.
That's actually a very, very profound, thought you've shared here, Sunil. And, and let me nudge this point a little bit ahead, where, a lot of product managers, and I'm sure you must have seen this in your journey, I've seen in mine, I know a lot of people that I speak to face, they are sometimes wondering how would they want to influence the executive leadership, right? And quite rightly, folks, product managers who are working in your organization, what would you want them to know to influence you and the rest of the leadership to steer the boat in the right direction? And sometimes they might disagree with you, for example, right? And disagree with the rest of the executive leadership. What tips, what would you wish the best product managers would do to influence you?
So I would say, three things, right? Firstly, they need to have a strong vision, right? Why are we building this product, right? What is the end game? Do they have customer empathy? Do they see what's the product market fit? And what's the ultimate goal? Is it revenue? Is it customer engagement? Is it sort of brand extension of the Rakuten brand? So there needs to be the clarity of thought with respect to the vision that they have for that product. Right? Secondly, I always look for people who are realistic. Product managers, of course, they need to be artists, they need to be thinkers, they need to think outside the box. But end of the day, an organization runs under constraints, right? You do not have an unconstrained environment, whether it's finances, investments, people, resources, time to market, regions. So there are going to be multiple dimensions of constraints. So I like people who are realistic with respect to crawl, walk, run, the approach that they take to taking their products to market. And finally, people who are experimental and get things done culture, right? And the reason I say this is there are always going to see, anything that you take on may feel, you might feel that there are a lot of roadblocks. But if you have this experimental culture, you're going to get into this, okay, I don't have to wait for the final solution. Let me launch something. Let me try this out. Let me get feedback first, right? Because what that does is you're no longer sitting in an ivory tower. You're actually testing your solutions out, whether it's with customers. And frankly, you will be surprised, when I've, look at many of the products that we have taken to market. Customers are actually a lot more empathetic to a product that you're willing to sort of change over time, as opposed to waiting for a long time and waiting for the right product and getting that out into the market, right? Even in B2B or B2C, we have seen that as long as you have a commitment to make this product great and you have communicated that vision, customers are okay taking a product that's like, 2/3 of the way there. So I like people who have that experimental culture. So these three things are things that I look for.
Very interesting thoughts, Sunil. And I think the ability to experiment, really, right? It's a very, very valuable skill for people to build. And experiment means experiments can fail. And then, if I may extend this argument and this thought process to something we were discussing earlier on innovation, right? I think when we look at the Indian ecosystem, where now there is this massive explosion of energy in startups, there is this very large, group of global companies, global MNCs setting up operations in India, scaling up their operations in India. And the question comes around innovation, right? And innovation is about experimenting. Now, the complexity I've seen in my previous experiences when I speak to the community in India, startup community and product management community in India, is they sense that in larger companies that they work, and coming from your vantage point, Sunil, would be helpful to know. Large companies often go slow on innovation and allow space to startups to grow fast and sometimes out innovate the larger companies. And so how do you make elephants dance, right? I think that's something that I've been pondering for a long time. Large companies, they have an incentive to continue doing their business because the money straight away goes to the bottom line. So you're scaling your current business up, right? And experimentation means things can fail, and therefore a lot of time, energy, money that you've invested can get lost. So what are your learnings, insights, Sunil, and anything that you're trying right now at your company that you could share with our audience?
So, I mean, maybe I can give two flavors to give you a sense for how we are trying to tackle some of these. And what you bring up is a very important problem. It's a very realistic problem. Because in larger companies, you already have existing business lines that are growing, generating revenue, scaling the business. So what's the incentive to go and burn your hands doing something that you're not already doing, right? So I guess the first one is what I call incremental innovation, right? And this boils down to culture. What I mean by this is encouraging your teams to innovate on their day-to-day work that they're already doing. And recognizing that makes that things pervasive. I'll give you an example, right? I mean, chatbots have been around for a long time. People have been using these things for different use cases. Our IT department within the company, they were getting a deluge of requests for, people asking for IT support. How do I reset my password? My Wi-Fi is not working. I need to order a mouse and keyboard and so on and so forth. And just these two IT engineers, they got tired of these backlogs and they built a chatbot which started responding to sort of day-to-day questions, helping engineers or whoever were asking them the question, automatically resolve through these interactive chatbot. They also built an action-oriented chatbot. If an employee comes and says, "Hey, I need a ergonomic mouse," it would automatically put in a sales and purchase order, raise a Jira ticket to track it, and then automate the whole process so that the employee gets their mouse on their desk within 4 or 5 days. So this is what I call day-to-day innovation, right? And then we highlighted some of these things. It suddenly started this, culture of everybody trying to do their part of innovation to simplify day-to-day life, right? Automation, things of this nature. So that's sort of one way to innovate in this large company context. The second way, is we have this team called, started a team called Tiger Team. Right, which whole purpose of this team is they can go work on any problem at any point of time, build a prototype, in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks, socialize it amongst customers, whether it's B2B or B2C, and then quickly start building a production-worthy, version of the product in 2 to 3, in maybe max 2 months, right? I'll give you an example. So we realized over time that, hey, we need very intelligent monitoring and observability platforms, because we've got like hundreds of Rakuten services that are running, right? Commerce, payments, banking, and so on. So we need to monitor the health of the business, health of the product and technology. And we were paying a lot of money to external, systems. And a small, this Tiger team came together, and they're not part of any organization because they wouldn't be allowed to do this. They worked directly under me, and they said, hey, this is something we can build in a matter of a month, right? So they built in a prototype, which got adoption within Rakuten. We've got 70 companies, about 24 of them said, wow, I'm getting this for half the cost of what you guys, are getting externally. We're going to take this up. And now that we saw that kind of interest within our Inc. companies, we are externalizing. It's a product line called Rakuten 6 Sense. We are externalizing in the APAC market. We have a whole bunch of customers lined up to take this product up. So this is an example of, you're looking at your own problems that you're solving, and you're saying, I have a solution, and now I'm going to sort of build it grounds up and take it to market. Now, the reason this worked, as I said, is if you can create one sort of space for them to exist without bureaucracy, without hierarchy, without them being part of the roadmap of some business, that team can span out so many innovations. And this is just one, right? This same team is working on a dozen other products, right? They're working on quantum computing, they're working on image recognition. So that's, I would call an alternative way for a CEO to manage innovation. And it's not the only way. It's one of 5 things you can do to let this run.
Cool. And Sunil, in the context of innovation, a lot of people are believing that AI has not delivered, to its promise. It's a lot more hype than reality. What are you seeing from your focus on Rakuten? Anything that you can share?
Sure. On the contrary, for us, AI has become our culture, right? I mean, we have a 1,000-member data sciences org, which basically works on data and AI solutions across the company. And I'll give you a few that are already in adoption. Right? So, creative AI. One of the things that we have to do is build great product catalogs, build creative ads, build movie posters for our over-the-top television business. So we use creative AI, where basically AI goes in and as long as you tell it the contours of these posters and images it has to build, it goes and creates. For example, if you say, we have given a tool to our merchant, and the merchant wants to say, hey, I need somebody to wear this shirt near a waterfall in the middle of a rainforest. He's not going to go take such photos, right? So creative AI actually generates this for the merchant, and they're actually actively using it on their product catalog, on the Rakuten Ichiba website, and it's getting great conversions, right? So that's one example. Another example is fraud detection, right? So as you know, we have payments, we have credit cards, we have banks, and that usually leads to fraudulent transactions, which is part and parcel of the business. So we use AI to look at sort of past history. We look at different permutation combinations. We look at patterns of fraud. All of that cannot be done manually or even programmatically, right? You need algorithms that actually learn all these new different types of fraud in real time, react to it, and change the way it catches it. So that's another area where we are using. The third one is what we call autonomous networks. Rakuten has a mobile business. We're one of the mobile network operators in Japan, going global now. Autonomous networks is where the AI in autonomous networks, in real time, it figures out what's the signal strength in a location, what's the demand, right? What's the bandwidth available, and should I create an additional cell to cater to the demand in this? And in real time, it does network and capacity plan. It also helps us, wake up and, when we get into network outages, how do you resiliently get out of that outage scenario? All of this is because of AI, right? And so we are using it in practice in every single business that we have.
Very cool. And I hope, people who listen to our conversation will really, enjoy it and internalize how you've made AI as a technology relevant, timely, and useful in Rakuten. we are getting some signals from Shreya that we have limited time now. So in the interest of time, some last thoughts really would be helpful from you, Sunil, to understand your wish list, for example, of how to advance the product ecosystem, culture, product management culture, and capabilities out of India. As you know, world class from India is the story that NASSCOM believes and it believes will help us position India more and more as the place where great products get built, right? So we are obviously in that journey. And given your vantage point, your experiences, what would be your wish list to make world class from India a defining reality?
Yeah, so I think I would encourage. We have a lot of technology talent in India, right? I mean, more than product talent, our technology talent is just the base of talent that we have is outstanding. And I would encourage a lot of these smart engineers, technologists to give product management a shot. Primarily because once you've built great technology, it's a natural outcome for you to define great products. That's one thing. And there's a lot of resources available. The easiest way is to do it within your own company, in your own domain. There's a lot of support ecosystems these days, like Institute of Product Leadership, product management courses from Stanford and Upgrad and all of those guys. That sort of gives you a flavor for classical product management, right? And the third one is solving for scale, right? I think to your point about world-class products from India, taking on scale products to solve becomes very, very critical on your journey to be a product manager. It's one thing to sort of build a piece of a product. For example, we've got 1 billion users within the Rakuten ecosystem, right? 1 billion customers. So the ID management system for these 1 billion users was built from Rakuten India, by our product and technology teams. And then when we were looking for, hey, where do we get sort of this talent? We looked at some of the guys who had built Aadhaar. So if you look in the ecosystem in India, you're now actually finding people who have solved for scale. So getting your own people or hiring people who have built for scale into your system will give you that edge on building world-class products, right? Building for 1 billion plus users. I mean, that is the thing to solve, according to me.
Shreya is messaging that time's up. It's been great having this conversation with you, Sunil. Hopefully we'll talk again sometime.
Thank you so much. Really great talking to you. Thanks a lot.